Stand close to the canvas, closer. Forget for a moment that you are in a museum, surrounded by the murmur of tourists and the hum of air conditioning. Fill your entire field of vision with the surface of the painting. What do you see? If you are looking at one of Claude Monet's late water lilies, you do not see a flower. You do not see a pad or a stem or the cool, dark depth of a pond. You see a chaotic topography of encrusted oil. You see a slash of violet that bleeds into a smudge of bruised cobalt. You see a thick ridge of white, seemingly applied with the violence of a trowel, cutting across a wash of muddy green. It is a mess. It is a construction site of pigment. It feels less like a depiction of nature and more like a record of a struggle. Now, step back. 1 step, 2 steps. The chaos begins to vibrate. The slashes resolve into ripples. The mud becomes depth. The violence softens into the delicate, trembling reflection of a weeping willow that isn't even in the frame. The painting performs a magic trick before your eyes. It is not an object, it is an event. It is happening to you, right now, in the space between your retina and the canvas. We have domesticated Claude Monet. We have printed his gardens on umbrellas, on tote bags, on coffee mugs. We have turned him into the patron saint of pretty, harmless art. We think of Giverny as a paradise, and his paintings as windows into a serene, vanished world. But we are looking at them wrong. If we strip away the merchandising and the century of familiarity, we find something far more radical and far more terrifying. Monet was not painting flowers. He was painting the act of seeing itself. He was obsessed with the gap between the world out there and the image that forms in the brain. He wanted to bypass the intellect, the part of the mind that says, this is a leaf, this is a cloud, and access the raw, unprocessed data of the eye. He once made a statement that sounds almost like a prayer, or perhaps a curse. He said he wished he had been born blind and then suddenly gained his sight as an adult. Why? So that he could see the world without knowing what anything was. He wanted to see pure patches of color. He wanted to see a blue square, not a sky. He wanted to see a vertical streak of pink, not a woman's dress. He wanted to liberate his vision from the tyranny of names. When we name an object, we stop seeing it. We substitute a symbol for the reality. We say tree, and our brain inserts a generic clip art image of a tree into our consciousness. We stop noticing the way the light catches the underside of the bark, or how the green of the leaves is actually a dozen shades of gray and silver under an overcast sky. Monet wanted to destroy the symbol. He wanted to paint the photons themselves. This was a scientific endeavor as much as an artistic one. In the late 19th century, we were just beginning to understand the physics of light and the physiology of the eye. Monet was conducting experiments, but his laboratory was the open air, and his microscope was his own hypersensitive vision. He would stare at a haystack in a field for hours, not to understand the structure of the hay, but to understand how the envelope of air around it changed as the sun moved 1 degree across the sky. Imagine the intensity of that gaze. To look at a calm river and not see water, but to see a mirror shattering the world into fragments of color. To look at a face and not see a person, but a landscape of flesh tones and shadows. It requires a kind of dissociation. You have to turn off the part of your brain that seeks meaning and turn up the part that registers sensation. In his early years, this pursuit was about clarity. He chased the instantaneity of the moment, the specific, fleeting quality of light at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday in spring. But as he aged, the pursuit shifted. The wish to be born blind suggests a desire to return to a state of innocence, a primal visual state. He wanted to paint the world before language. This is why the water lilies are so disorienting. In many of them, there is no horizon line. There is no bank to stand on. We are floating. We are suspended in a void where the water and the sky are indistinguishable. The reflections of the clouds in the water are just as real as the lilies floating on the surface. Up and down lose their meaning. We are lost in a kaleidoscope. This was a radical break from the history of Western art. For centuries, painting was about creating a window into a structured, understandable space. Perspective lines led the eye to a focal point. Objects were solid. The world made sense. Monet dissolved the window. He dissolved the solid objects. He dissolved the sense. He left us with only the vibration of light. He was trying to capture something that does not exist in the physical world, the sensation of a moment. A moment is not a thing. It is a transition. It is the boundary between what was and what will be. By the time you perceive it, it is gone. To paint it is to try to pin down a ghost. And yet, he tried. Day after day, year after year, he sat by that pond, battling the changing weather, the shifting light, and his own limitations. He built the garden at Giverny not just to enjoy it, but to control his subject matter. If he couldn't stop the sun from moving, he could at least control the plants. He created a living studio, a controlled environment where he could conduct his experiments on perception. But there is a melancholy in this wish to be born blind. It implies that knowledge is a burden. It implies that our understanding of the world corrupts our experience of it. Monet wanted to unknow the world in order to see it clearly. He wanted to strip away the accumulated layers of culture, memory, and habit to reach a core of visual truth. As we stand before these massive canvases, we are invited to share in that impossible desire. We are invited to let go of our need to identify, to categorize, to name. We are asked to simply see, to let the color wash over us, to feel the temperature of the light, to accept the ambiguity of the image. It is a beautiful, seductive invitation. But as we will see, the story of Monet's vision is not just a philosophical journey, it is a biological tragedy. The man who wished to see the world as if he were new to sight would eventually face the terrifying prospect of losing it altogether. The disintegration of form in his paintings was not just a stylistic choice, it was a symptom of a crumbling world. The wish to be born blind is a poetic fancy. The reality of going blind is a descent into fire. If Impressionism began as a young man's game, a revolution of bright, clear light and crisp observations, it ended in a desperate struggle against biology. We often talk about an artist's late style as a spiritual evolution, a loosening of the wrist brought on by wisdom and age. With Monet, we cannot separate the style from the pathology. We have to talk about the cataracts. By 1912, Claude Monet, the man whose entire existence was predicated on the nuance of his visual cortex, was diagnosed with nuclear cataracts in both eyes. This is a cruel irony, almost too literary to be true. A composer going deaf, a dancer losing their legs, a painter of light slowly having the lights turned out. But it wasn't just a dimming, it was a transformation. A cataract acts like a yellow filter placed over the eye. It absorbs blue and violet light. It muddies the world. Slowly, insidiously, the cool, crisp blues that defined Monet's early career, the sparkle of the Seine, the sharp shadows in the snow at Argenteuil, began to vanish. They were replaced by a suffocating monochromatic haze of reds, browns, and sickly yellows. Look at the Rouen Cathedral series from the 1890s. These are masterpieces of observation. Monet painted the same stone facade at dawn, at noon, at dusk. He painted it in gray weather and in bright sun. In these works, the stone is solid, yet it dissolves into colored light. The shadows are full of blue and purple. The air feels breathable. You can tell the time of day just by looking at the color of the shadows. It is the pinnacle of the scientific eye, objective, rigorous, precise. Now, compare that to the Japanese bridge paintings from the early 1920s. The structure is gone. The bridge itself, that sturdy green wooden arch, is barely recognizable. It is a brooding, heavy shape, consumed by a firestorm of swirling maroons, rusts, and acidic yellows. The air is thick, hot, almost suffocating. These paintings do not look like a garden in France. They look like a landscape on Mars, or a vision of a world ending in flames. This was not a choice. Monet was literally losing the ability to see the color blue. To him, white paint looked yellow, green paint looked brown. His world was shrinking into a sepia tunnel. He wrote letters of agonizing despair. "I see everything in a fog," he complained. "The colors no longer have the same intensity for me." He developed coping mechanisms that are heartbreaking in their practicality. He laid out his palette in the exact same order every day, memorizing the position of the colors so he wouldn't have to rely on his eyes to find the vermilion or the cobalt. He had to read the labels on the tubes of paint, tiny printed text, bringing them close to his face to confirm that the tube he held was indeed cerulean and not something else, because to his eyes they looked the same. Imagine the psychological horror of this. You are standing in front of your canvas, brush loaded with what the label says is blue, but your eyes tell you it is dirt. Do you trust the label, or do you trust your sensation? If you paint what you see, you paint a lie. If you paint what you know, you are betraying your entire artistic philosophy of painting only the sensation. He was caught in a trap between his memory of the world and his current experience of it, and in that trap, something explosive happened. The restraint of impressionism, the polite observational distance, shattered. He began to attack the canvas. The brushstrokes in these late works are frantic. They are thick, ropey coils of paint. He isn't dabbing anymore. He is smearing, scratching, scrawling. You can feel the frustration in the texture. It is the tactile rage of a man trying to claw his way through a dirty window. He is trying to force the light to appear. If he can't see the delicacy, he will substitute it with intensity. Critics at the time were baffled. They thought he had gone senile. They saw these paintings as the sad, messy decline of a master. They didn't understand that they were witnessing a neurological event transcribed on canvas. Monet was painting his own blindness. He was documenting the disintegration of his sensory apparatus. But there is another layer to this tragedy. In 1923, after years of refusal, he finally agreed to surgery on his right eye. The operation removed the cataract, but the result was not the miracle cure he hoped for. Suddenly, his right eye could see blue again, but too much blue. The yellow filter was gone, and the world was flooded with ultraviolet light that a normal lens would filter out. He now saw the world in two completely different color spectrums. His left eye saw a yellow-red world. His right eye saw a terrifyingly blue-violet world. His brain could not fuse the images. He suffered from double vision and warped color perception. He complained that objects curved and floated. He was living in a psychedelic nightmare. And yet, he kept painting. He put on glasses with special tints to try and balance the eyes, but he frequently tore them off in frustration. He destroyed hundreds of canvases during this time, slashing them with a knife or burning them, convinced they were failures. But the ones that survived, they are not failures. They are the most raw, honest, and visceral paintings of the 19th and early 20th centuries. In his failure to capture the reality of the garden, he captured something far more profound, the subjective, unstable nature of human perception. He proved that we do not see with our eyes, we see with our brains. And when the link between the two is broken, the world doesn't just get blurry, it becomes a new, alien place. The catastrophe of the eye forced Monet to abandon the last vestiges of realism. He could no longer be a reporter of the exterior world. He had to become an explorer of his own interior decay. And in that darkness, he found a new kind of light, one that didn't come from the sun, but from the burning intensity of his own will to create. In the basement of the Orangerie Museum in Paris, there are 2 oval rooms. They are designed to be a sanctuary. The walls are curved, and on them hang the grands decorations, the massive panoramic water lilies that Monet spent the final years of his life creating. When you walk into these rooms, the world outside stops. There are no corners. The painting surrounds you. It has no beginning and no end. It is over 2 meters high and spans nearly 100 meters in length. You are not looking at a painting. You are inside it. You are submerged. This was Monet's final, defiant gesture. At a time when the art world was moving towards cubism, Dada, and the hard edges of modernism, a blind old man in a garden was creating something that would leapfrog them all. He was inventing the immersive environment. These panels are the culmination of his struggle. They are the answer to the riddle of his blindness. In these works, the details have completely evaporated. There are no banks, no sky, no perspective. There is only the sensation of floating in color. The paint is applied with a freedom that anticipates the future. Up close, the brushwork looks like the abstract expressionism of the 1950s. Look at the surface of these canvases. Compare them to the works of Jackson Pollock or Mark Rothko. Pollock danced around his canvas, dripping paint to create a web of energy. Rothko stacked blocks of color to create a vibrating spiritual void. Monet did both, decades earlier. The failing eyesight that tortured him became the catalyst for modern abstraction. Because he could no longer focus on the things of the world, the petals, the leaves, the ripples, he was forced to focus on the field. He treated the canvas as an all-over surface. He decentralized the image. There is no focal point in the water lilies. Every square inch of the canvas is equally important. This is the core tenet of modernism. The painting is an object in itself, not a picture of something else. Monet's failure to see reality led him to dismantle the very structure of Western painting. He broke the frame. By creating a painting that wraps around the viewer, he destroyed the idea of the viewer as a separate, detached observer. You cannot stand back and judge these paintings. You have to surrender to them. This predicts the installation art of the late 20th century. It predicts the light installations of James Turrell or the infinite rooms of Yayoi Kusama. It is ironic that the Impressionists were originally mocked for being mere eyes, for lacking intellect or structure. Cézanne famously said, "Monet is only an eye, but my God, what an eye." He meant it as a half compliment, but Monet proved that the eye is a gateway to the soul. By pushing visual sensation to its absolute limit until it broke down into abstraction, he reached a spiritual plane. The water lilies at the Orangerie were dedicated to the French state as a monument to peace following the carnage of World War I. Think about that. While Europe was recovering from the trenches, from mustard gas and mechanized death, Monet was in his garden, nearly blind, painting a meditation on water and light. It wasn't an escape from reality. It was a counter-argument. Against the horror of history, he offered the permanence of nature. Against the fragmentation of the world, he offered a unified field of vision. Against the darkness of war and his own fading sight, he offered an infinite, luminous blue. Monet died in 1926. At his funeral, the statesman George Clemenceau, his close friend, saw the black cloth draped over the coffin. In a moment of defiance, he ripped it off, crying, "No black for Monet!" He replaced it with a flowered curtain, a tapestry of color. It was a fitting tribute. Monet had spent his life fighting against the black. He fought against the blackness of academic tradition, the blackness of shadows, and finally, the encroaching blackness of his own blindness. He is not just a painter of pretty gardens. He is the first true modernist. He is the man who stared into the sun until his eyes burned out, and then painted the afterimage. He taught us that the world is not solid. It is flux. It is energy. It is light. So the next time you see a Monet, don't just look at the flowers. Look at the struggle. Look at the dissolution. Look at the abstraction. And realize that you are looking at the work of a man who closed his eyes to the world of things so that he could open them to the world of pure sensation. He painted what does not exist so that we might finally see what is true.